Rain on a chalk road between Warwickshire and Derbyshire, and Lady Rosalind Whitmore walks in ruined shoes, the hired carriage broken at the ford a mile behind her. She hears hooves and does not turn. When the sound stops, when boots hit the mud, she says only, "Don't follow me," without looking back. The Duke of Ashwick dismounts from a posting horse that is not his own, legs stiff from 80 miles, no cravat, coat black with rain, and tells her she left because he said, "Convention," when she needed something else. She turns then and confronts him. She held 2 letters in the same handwriting and asked him to explain the distance, and he gave her a solicitor's brief. He admits he knows what he did. She tells him he is following a woman who gave him the chance to say one honest word and watched him choose 7 institutional ones instead. The rain has been falling for 3 hours by the time Rosalind reaches the place where the road narrows between low stone walls. Her traveling cloak is soaked through at the shoulders. The hem of her dress drags mud. Behind her, the sound of hooves grows louder, then stops. She does not turn. "Don't follow me," she says. The man dismounts. His boots hit the chalk road with a sound like something breaking. When she finally turns, the Duke of Ashwick is standing 10 paces back, holding the reins of a posting horse that is not his own. His coat is black with rain. No cravat. Hair plastered to his forehead, he looks like a man who has ridden through 3 counties without stopping. "You left because I said convention when you needed me to say something else," he says. Rosalind does not move closer. "I left because I held 2 letters in the same handwriting and asked you to explain the distance between them, and you gave me a solicitor's brief." He nodded slowly. "I know." "Then you know what you are following," she says. "A woman who gave you the chance to say one honest word and watched you choose 7 institutional ones instead." He ties the horse to the wall. His hands are shaking, not from cold. "The March letter was written before I met you," he says. "About a name, not about you." "And when you met me?" She takes 1 step forward. "When you knew the name was a person who corrects your Virgil and teaches your daughter Latin and makes you lose sentences in corridors. Did you go back to that letter and burn it? Did you ever examine what you had written?" She heard him exhale. "No." "Why not?" He opens his mouth. I closes it, opens it again. "Because I did not think about what language does," he says finally. "I assumed conduct would speak." The rain is heavier now. She can barely see the road ahead. "It did not speak," she says. "You did. In my drawing room. And what you said was convention, not sentiment. Those were your words. When I asked if I was sufficient or chosen, you answered in the language of a solicitor." His voice was quiet. "I know." "Then why are you here?" He looks at her. Water runs down his face. She cannot tell if he is crying or if it is only rain. "Because somewhere in the 2nd county," he says, "I heard the sentence I said to you, and for the first time I heard it the way you heard it. And I understood that the problem was never the feeling. The problem was the man carrying it." She does not answer. She turns and begins walking again. Behind her, his voice. "There is a chapel, half a mile ahead." "I am not going to a chapel with you." "The rain is worsening," he says. "I am asking for shelter, not sanctuary." She stops, does not turn. "Half a mile," she says, "and then you will say what you came to say, or you will leave." 4 months earlier. May dinner at Whitmore House. 16 guests seated along a table lit by candles in silver holders. Lord Dominic Carlisle, Duke of Ashwick, sits 3 places to the left of the host and quotes Virgil, Book 4, The Fall of Dido, and his translation is wrong. From the far end of the table, a woman's voice. The line is, "Improbe amor, equid non mortalia pectora cogis." You have rendered cogis as permits, rather than compels. The distinction between permission and compulsion is the entire tragedy. Silence. His fork stops halfway to his mouth. He sets it down carefully and looks toward the voice. Lady Rosalind Whitmore, 27, daughter of the Marquis of Wycliffe, sits with her hands folded on the table and her eyes on him. She does not smile. She does not apologize. "You are correct," he says after a moment. She met his gaze. "I know." The man beside her, Lord Grafton, laughs nervously and tries to redirect the conversation. Rosalind does not help him. She takes a sip of wine and returns her attention to her plate. After dinner, Dominic finds her in the drawing room, standing near the window with a book in her hands. "May I call again?" he asks, and she looks up. "You may call when you have read book 4 in full." "I have read it." "Then you have read it poorly," she says. "Come back when you have read it well." 3 days later, he arrives at Whitmore House with a different translation, still wrong, but differently wrong. She receives him in the library. He presents his argument. She dismantles it in less than 10 minutes. "You are closer," she says, "but you are still rendering the passage as though Dido chooses her fate. She does not choose. She is compelled. That is the tragedy." "And if I read it again?" he asks. "Then I will tell you where you are still wrong." He does not win the argument. He does not leave. They stand in the library for 40 minutes, and when he finally departs, he bows and says, "Spout, I will return on Thursday." "You may return when you have something new to say." He returns on Thursday. The courtship unfolds over June and July, like the slow opening of a door neither of them intended to find. He calls twice weekly. Each visit contains one argument, one concession, one moment where his composure slips before he repairs it. In early June, they walk the grounds of Whitmore House. She asks why he never remarried after his first wife died. He tells her the question is too direct for a second visit. "Then answer it on the third," she says. On the third visit, he tells her about Eleanor, an arranged marriage. Gentle, willing, dead of fever after 2 years. He does not say he loved her. He does not say he did not. "You are being careful with your words," Rosalind observes. "And I am always careful with my words." "That is not a compliment," she says. In the conservatory one afternoon in July, a fern leaf catches in her hair. He reaches to remove it. His fingers brush her temple. The leaf comes free. His hand stays. "Your hand is still there," she says. He paused. "I know." 2 seconds pass. 3. Then he withdraws and steps back. "Forgive me," he says. "For what? Removing the leaf? Or for leaving your hand where it did not belong?" "For the latter." "Then do not apologize," she says. "Apologize when you do something you regret, not when you do something you intended." He looks at her. She looks back. Neither moves. "I intended it," he says finally. She held his gaze. "I know." At the Harrington ball in August, during the promenade, he interlocks their fingers. Not the formal hold, but something closer, more deliberate. She feels the shift immediately. "This is not the choreography," she says. He kept walking. "No. People will notice. I am not concerned." They complete the promenade with their hands linked in a way that makes Lord Grafton, watching from the edge of the room, turn and leave. After, in a corridor away from the music, she stops and faces him. "When you look at me," she says, "what do you see?" His mouth opens. She can see the sentence forming behind his eyes. She waits. "I see a woman I did not expect," he says. "That is not what you were going to say." His jaw tightened. "No." "Then what were you going to say?" He does not answer. He bows and leaves. She watches him go and understands. He had the word. He chose not to say it. In late August, Dominic invites Rosalind to Ashwick Park. The house is larger than Whitmore, older, built in the previous century with stone that has darkened over time. His daughter Cecily, 5 years old, appears in the garden while Rosalind is walking alone. "Are you the lady who corrects Papa's Latin?" Cecily asks. Rosalind kneels so they are level. "I am. Mrs. Kemp says Latin is for boys, but I want to learn it. Will you teach me?" "Mrs. Kemp is mistaken," Rosalind says. "The rule was always wrong. Shall we start with amo, amas, amat?" Cecily nods seriously. Rosalind begins the conjugation. When they reach amo, Cecily stops. "What does that mean?" she asks. She smiled gently. "I love." Cecily repeats it carefully. "Amo. That is a good word to start with." From the terrace, Dominic watches. He does not interrupt. When Rosalind finishes the lesson and Cecily runs back toward the house, he comes down the steps and joins her. "Thank you," he says. "For what?" "For teaching her the word I should have started with." She looks at him. "You have never asked me for anything directly. You circle. You construct sentences that contain the feeling without arriving at the verb." "I am aware." "Why?" He does not answer. They walk back toward the house in silence. That evening, in the drawing room, she asks him about Eleanor again. This time he tells her more. Eleanor's last words, the request she made that he could not fulfill. "She asked you to say something that was not carefully arranged," Rosalind says. He stared at the fire. "Yes. And you could not." "I did not understand what she was asking for," he says. "And I thought she was asking for the feeling. I had the feeling. What I did not have was the verb." "You have it now," Rosalind says. He looks at her. "Do I?" She does not answer. She sets down her cup and leaves the room. September arrives with cooler air and shorter days. Rosalind is in her father's study at Whitmore House, looking for a ledger he asked her to retrieve, when she finds the folder. It is labeled with Dominic's name. Inside, correspondence between solicitors, dated March, before they met. One letter in Dominic's handwriting. "The arrangement is satisfactory. Miss Whitmore's qualities are sufficient to the purpose." She reads it twice. Then she goes to her room and retrieves the August letter he sent her, the one that said, "Your existence has reorganized mine." She holds both letters. Same handwriting, same man, on different language. The next day, she asks him to call. He arrives in the afternoon. She receives him in the drawing room and closes the door. "These are in the same handwriting," she says, holding both letters. The March letter says, "sufficient." The August letter says, "Your existence has reorganized mine." Explain the distance between them. He looks at the letters. His face does not change. The March correspondence was a standard preliminary assessment, he says. The political terms required a position statement. The language reflects convention, not sentiment. She sets both letters on the table between them. "I asked you if I am sufficient or chosen," she says. "You answered in the language of a solicitor." The courtship speaks for itself. "The courtship does not speak," she interrupts. "You speak, or you do not. And you have just demonstrated which." She stands. He stands as well. Rosalind. "I will not be sufficient," she says. "Do not follow me." She leaves the room. He does not follow. That night she writes a note and places it on her dressing table. "I will not be sufficient. Do not follow me." By morning, she is gone. Dominic reads the note in the gray light of dawn. He goes to the study. The folder is open on the desk. He reads his own March letter and hears it for the first time from her side. It is unfair, he thinks. The letter was preliminary. He did not know her. The courtship was the correction. but even as he thinks it, he knows she is right. She asked him to explain the distance. He gave her convention, not sentiment. He produced a brief when she needed a word. He rides north. The first county passes in rain. And at the posting inn, her traveling companion Palmer is waiting with a message. Lady Rosalind asked me to tell you something, Palmer says. She said, he is the first man who made me believe the word exists. And then I asked him to say it, and he gave me a position statement. Dominic does not reply. He mounts a fresh horse and continues. The rain worsens. By the second county, his coat is soaked through. He begins to hear his own sentence. Convention, not sentiment. And for the first time, he hears it the way she heard it. Not as an explanation, as an evasion. At the second posting inn, the horse is blown. He stands in the stable yard, waiting for a fresh mount, when a rider arrives. Wycliffe's secretary, carrying a letter. Dominic tears open the seal and reads by the light of a lantern someone has hung on a post. If you pursue my daughter, I withdraw support for the canal bill. The arrangement was contingent on cooperation. Return to London. He reads it twice. The canal bill, months of negotiation, votes secured, language drafted. The arrangement that started everything, now being used as a leash. He tears the letter, both halves, then quarters, into the puddle at his feet. The ink begins to dissolve, black threads in the water. The secretary stares. Your Grace, tell Lord Wycliffe I am no longer party to his arrangements, Dominic says. Tell him I said it in plain language. He mounts the fresh horse and rides into the third county with no deal, no leverage, no institutional language left. Only the word he has never spoken aloud. The third county? The ford. Her carriage axle broke trying to cross, and the driver could not repair it. She left him with the horses and began walking. The road is chalk, turned to gray paste by the rain. Her shoes are ruined, her cloak is heavy with water. When she hears hooves behind her, she does not turn. Don't follow me, she says. He dismounts. His boots hit the road. She turns and sees him. Soaked, exhausted, a man who has ridden 80 miles without stopping. You left because I said convention when you needed me to say something else, he says. She does not move closer. I left because I held 2 letters in the same handwriting and asked you to explain the distance between them, and you gave me a solicitor's brief. He met her eyes. I know. Then you know what you are following. A woman who gave you the chance to say one honest word and watched you choose 7 institutional ones instead. I know what I did, he says, and I need to tell you why. Not here, she says, not in the road. Then where? She looks ahead. The road curves between low stone walls, beyond, barely visible through the rain, the shape of a building. There is a chapel, he says, half a mile. I am not going to a chapel with you. The rain is worsening, he says. I am asking for shelter, not sanctuary. She looks at him. Water runs down his face. His hands are shaking. Half a mile, she says. And then you will say what you came to say, or you will leave. They walk side by side, not touching. The rain does not ease. By the time they reach the chapel, her dress is soaked to the knees. His coat drips onto the flagstones as they step inside. The chapel is small, medieval, unlocked. Stone walls, narrow windows, wooden pews dark with age. A water pools from their clothes onto the floor. Rosalind sits on the front pew. Dominic stands in what she recognizes as his parliamentary posture. Straight back, hands behind him. Sit down, she says. He sits. For a moment, neither speaks. The rain drums on the roof. She looks at him, waiting. The March letter was written about a name, he says finally. Not about you. Your father's solicitor approached mine. I wrote sufficient, the way I write every political assessment, without knowledge, without having met you. It was a response to a proposal, not a description of you. And when you met me, she asks. When you knew the name was a person who corrects your Virgil and teaches your daughter Latin and makes you lose sentences in corridors, did you go back to that letter and burn it? Her voice was steady. You know? Why not? He looks down at his hands. Because of Eleanor. The name lands differently now. She waits. My first wife, he says. Arranged. I performed a marriage for 2 years with every courtesy and no feeling, and she knew. Before she died, she said, I have always known the difference between kind and chosen. I wish, just once, you had said something that was not carefully arranged. Rosalind does not interrupt. He continues. She asked why I could not say what I meant, and I drew a lesson from that. But I drew the wrong lesson. I concluded I must feel more deeply. The actual lesson, the one she was telling me, the one you told me in the drawing room, was that I must speak differently, not more feeling, different language. But I did not hear it, not from Eleanor, not from you. I heard the complaint without understanding it. You have been told twice, Rosalind says. By 2 women, he says, both standing in front of me, both saying, your words do not match your feeling. And both times I heard them say, feel more, when they were saying, speak plainly. I am not a man who was afraid to speak, Rosalind. I am a man who did not know his language was broken. I believed the arrangement transmitted the feeling. It does not. Eleanor told me at 42. You told me at 27. I have been told. I simply could not hear it because the assumption that conduct speaks, that structure carries, is so deep in me that examining it felt like examining breathing. She looks at him. His face is pale. His hands are trembling. You gave me a solicitor's brief when I asked you if I was chosen, she says. Yes, and then it was not because I was frightened. It was because I genuinely believed that the courtship speaks for itself was an adequate answer. I heard myself say it and thought, that is clear. That addresses her concern. She will understand. I understood perfectly, she says. I understood that a man who says, the courtship speaks for itself, is a man who has never considered whether it does. Her tone was final. You are correct. He stands. Then his legs give, not dramatically, but simply, the collapse of a body that has exceeded its limit. His knees hit the flagstones. The sound is loud in the stone space. Rosalind does not help him up. She looks down at him, a duke on his knees on a chapel floor, brought there by exhaustion and by the first honest sentence of his life, arriving at the same moment his body fails. I need to say this from here, he says, because I have spent my entire life saying things from above, from a desk, from a podium, from the position of a man who arranges. I am saying this from the floor. Then say it. I love you, he says. I have loved you since you corrected Kogi's, and I understood that the distinction between permission and compulsion is not just the tragedy, it is the answer. I was not permitted to love you by the arrangement. I was compelled. By you. And I hid the compulsion inside sufficient and satisfactory, and the courtship speaks for itself. Because I have never in my life said the verb without the structure around it. Amo. The word your daughter learned first because it is the right word to start with. I should have started with it. She kneels, on the flagstones, level with him. Oh, Eleanor asked you to say the word, she says. He nodded once. Yes. You could not. I did not know it was the word she was asking for. I thought she was asking for the feeling. I had the feeling. What I did not have was the verb. You have it now. I have it now. In a chapel. On a floor. 80 miles from the drawing room where you asked me to explain the distance between two letters, and I gave you a solicitor's brief. The distance is this. The March letter is what a man writes when he thinks language is furniture. The August letter is what a man writes when a woman has taught him language is habitation. I lived in sufficient. You made me need chosen. And I could not say it, because I did not know that saying it was the point. She takes his face between her hands, and the gesture of a woman who has spent 13 years examining men's expressions for the gap between what they say and what they mean. Her palms against his jaw, her eyes on his. Reading. Your face is doing something your language never did, she says. What is it doing? She leaned closer. Arriving. She kisses him. From the position of examination, her hands on his face, the analytical grip becoming the vehicle for surrender. He does not hold her. He stays still. A man who has spent his life arranging, receiving for the first time instead of managing. When they separate, his forehead rests against hers. Say it again, she says. I love you. Without the structure. Without the structure. Without the arrangement. Without the preliminary assessment. Amo, in plain language. On a chapel floor. Do not say sufficient ever again. He promised quietly. I will not. They turn south in a hired carriage, the rain easing as they leave the third county behind. His coat is around her shoulders. She sits across from him, watching his face in the gray light. My father will be furious, she says. I am going to stand in his study and tell him that I love his daughter, and that the word sufficient was the worst piece of language I have ever produced, and that his daughter is not a clause. He will not like that. He will like it less when I tell him I know about his letter regarding your mother. She goes still. You cannot. I can, because you carry it. 13 years. And as long as that letter remains the secret your detection was built on, you will test every man against a word your father wrote. He should know what his vocabulary cost. She reaches across the carriage, takes his hand, holds it, the first calm touch since the conservatory. No leaf, no ball, no crisis. A woman choosing to hold a man's hand because she wants to. Eleanor would have liked you, she says after a moment. You think so? She asked you to say the word. You could not say it for her. But you said it on a chapel floor 80 miles from home. She would have found that satisfactory. He looks at her. She smiles slightly. I am reclaiming the word, she says. Sufficient was what my father said about my mother. It is also what you wrote before you met me. But it is not what you said in the chapel. In the chapel you said, compelled. I am keeping that word. The carriage continues south. The rain stops. By the time they reach Ashwick Park, and the sky's clearing, November at Ashwick Park, the nursery is warm, a fire in the grate. Cecily sits at the table, working through Latin conjugation. Amo, amas, amat, she recites carefully. Amamus, amatis, amant. She smiled warmly. Perfect. Cecily looks up. Miss Whitmore, Papa has been different. He reads to me every night now, not just Tuesdays and Saturdays, every night. And he does the voices. Dominic appears in the doorway. Rosalind looks at him. You do the voices, she says. Cecily prefers them. You did not do them before. I did not do many things before, he says. Cecily tilts her head. Papa, what does sufficient mean? Both adults go still. Dominic comes into the room and kneels beside his daughter's chair. It means enough, he says. But not the good kind. The kind that means you stop looking. What is the good kind? He looks at Rosalind. She looks back, waiting. Chosen, he says. The good kind is chosen. Is Miss Whitmore chosen? Miss Whitmore was chosen the evening she told me I was pronouncing Latin incorrectly. I simply took 4 months and 80 miles to learn how to say so. On the nursery table, beside Cecily's slate, a letter in Dominic's hand. 7 words, replacing the March letter. I choose you, in plain language. Rosalind keeps it in her pocket, where the August letter used to live. Christmas in the Ashwick Library. Snow on the windows. Dominic sits in the chair by the fire, reading to Cecily with full theatrical commitment, voices for every character, gestures for the dramatic moments. Rosalind sits at the desk beside them, while correcting his Latin pronunciation in real time. The C is hard in that word, she says without looking up from her book. He repeats the word correctly. Cecily laughs. On the mantel, 2 letters in matching frames side by side. The March letter, sufficient to the purpose, and the September letter, I choose you, in plain language. Rosalind insisted on keeping both, not to punish, but to preserve the distance. The evidence that a man can write one word and learn another, and that the correction is 80 miles long and worth everyone. Mrs. Kemp has stopped saying Latin is for boys. The household has learned a new language, amo, conjugated in every room. Spring arrives with green fields and longer days. The charity school above the village chapel has 12 pupils now, 3 subjects, and a new slate for each child. Rosalind teaches Latin on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Cecily sits in the front row, the Duke's daughter in a village classroom, learning alongside tenant children. On this particular Thursday, Dominic arrives at the school door. He does not announce himself. He sits on the bench at the back, beside a farmer's son, and listens to his daughter conjugate love in a dead language and a living one. After, walking home through the fields, "You sat in the back row," Rosalind says. "I am learning to sit where I am placed instead of where I arrange myself." That is the first adequate sentence you have produced without coaching. "I have an excellent teacher. You have an exacting one," she says. "There is a distinction." His hand finds the back of her neck. She leans into it without pausing her sentence, and also the first gesture that is neither crisis nor confession, but daily. 2 people who have stopped performing. The school, the bench, the mantel with 2 letters, Cecily's Latin echoing through a house where a duke learned across 80 miles, on a chapel floor, that the only structure love requires is the sentence you are willing to say out loud, everything chosen